Hi church family! Today we're going to be reading Exodus 24, 12 through 18. I'm not going to read it in super great detail, I'm going to summarize a little bit, but if you want to read it, that's totally cool, I recommend it. But yeah, let's get started. Okay, so verse 12 says, "Then the Lord said to Moses, 'Come up to me on the mountain. Stay there, and I will give you the tablets of stone on which I have inscribed the instructions and commands so you can teach the people.'" Right off the bat, God is calling Moses to climb up a mountain into God's presence, which is crazy. So Mount Sinai was the mountain on which God dwelt. He lived there, and the hike is about a 4-hour hike. So God was asking Moses to go on a 4-hour hike. That's pretty intense for anyone who's ever been on a hike in the desert. Not many people have, but yes. So it was about a 4-hour hike. Later on, in verse 15, the Bible says that Moses did climb the mountain and the cloud covered it. So in the Old Testament, God's presence was generally represented as a cloud. So, for example, when God was leading the people out of Egypt, he would be a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night, which is so super cool. So, yes, Moses climbed the mountain and God covered him. So, it's so important to remember that when God calls us to do something, even though it's difficult, like climbing a mountain, his presence still covers us, his hand is still on us, he's still protecting us, he's not waiting till we get to the very, very top of the mountain to, hug us and embrace us. His hand is on us the entire way, and he will catch you when you fall. The Lord is there at all times. He sees you and he knows you, and yes. So verse 16. "And the glory of the Lord settled on Mount Sinai, and the cloud covered it for 6 days. On the 7th day, the Lord called Moses from inside the cloud." So it is very important to note that Moses was not at the top of the mountain when God started covering it with his presence. Because on our journey to obedience and to the end goal of obedience, sometimes we only think that God's presence is there and that's the only time when we'll get close to him, but actually the journey is what gets us closer to God. And so having God's cloud covering Moses was so cool, but God actually called him into his presence later on when Moses climbed higher. When Moses pursued God's presence, God continued to bless him and cover him more in his presence. So the more that we pursue God, the more God covers us and pursues us. Verse 17, "To the Israelites at the foot of the mountain, the glory of the Lord appeared at the summit like a consuming fire." So this is super important because the Israelites did not climb the mountain with Moses. Moses climbed the mountain by himself, but the Israelites saw the effect of obedience that Moses had, they weren't even on the mountain, they were watching from a distance, and they saw God's presence as a fire. And so my prayer for our church is that we would be so in pursuit of God's love and God's presence that we would literally be a consuming fire, right? That people could look at us and say, that's a little bit different. Like, I want that. That is fire. That is good. So, yes. Verse 18, Then Moses disappeared into the cloud as he climbed higher into the mountain, and he remained on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. This is super important because so Mount Sinai has a peak, right? Every mountain has a top. There's a bottom. But when it comes to God's presence can always go higher. God's presence can always go deeper. And it's so important to realize that, yes, Moses reached the top of the mountain, right? But in our relationship with God, we can always pursue him more. We can always pursue God more. He is eternal. He is more than we could ever imagine. And so pursuing him is never going to disappoint. It's never going to leave you hanging, leaving you wonder. It is enough, and it is good stuff that satisfies. Another thing is that Moses didn't just hike up that mountain for a 4-hour hike, say hi to God and walk back down. He dwelled there for 40 days and 40 nights. He just sat there in God's presence, and God talked to him. And actually God instructed him on things that the Israelites had to do, like building the temple and the Ark of the Covenant, and all the crazy things. It's in the next chapters up till chapter 33 in Exodus. It's all God talking. So that was a lot of talking God did those 40 days and 40 nights. But it's so important to realize that we can it is important to pursue God, not just on a Sunday, not just on a Wednesday, but throughout our week. And not just like every day be like, good morning, God, like bless my day. Like every day we should be pursuing Jesus. Every day, every second of our lives should be worship. Every breath we take should worship Jesus. And that's so important to realize and so important to know. And yeah, that's all I have. Love you guys. Bye.